Well, it's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you acknowledging Thanksgiving. Back in the States, we can only wonder what the first Thanksgiving brought and what those conversations were around the fire on that day and those days that were around this holiday. My talk is really a great one to follow, Dr. Miles, because it talks about some specific skill sets that we hope will be infused into the business school curricula. So let me begin. At Lemoyne College in Syracuse, we have created a platform called the Global Jesuit Case Series. And certainly many of you have heard of what we call the juggernaut of case centers, Harvard. Probably Harvard, if we mention Harvard, we think about the case method, we think about case teaching and how they're used for management and business development. The question you have to ask yourself is, and this was brought up in a meeting this morning, is has Harvard done a good job of developing leaders? Some would say yes, some would say no, some would say, well, if we go back and reflect on 2008 and some of the financial challenges that we have, we would say that maybe there's a different vision that needs to be infused into management education. So one of the goals, the main goals of the Global Jesuit Case Series is to foster a development of leaders who will serve as a transformational force. So how do we do that? How do we take a business person and transform their thinking? Not so that they're not just a technical person, not just thinking about marketing and finance, but how their decisions impact the businesses, the community, the planet. That's what we're trying to think about with the Global Jesuit Case Series, and also my colleagues, and what we're hoping is a long-term commitment with the folks in UNIAPAC. So what do we want that force to be? We want that force to be one that respects dignity of the human person, primarily. We want it to promote a greater good of the global human community. And we want a force that fosters awareness of the potential impacts on the environment, of social responsibility, and of principled governance. So it's impact. Those decisions have impact, and we want those leaders to understand what that impact is, both internally and to the external environment. If you get a chance, before I forget to say this, because I will go too long and he's going to kick me in a second and go, you're taking too long. I recommend that you go out and look at a site called Giving Voice to Values, GVV, Giving Voice to Values. We just had Mary Gentile come and talk at Lemoyne, give a keynote presentation, and her take on values is this. She basically says that we can teach values in the classroom. We can infuse values. We can talk about ethics and we can talk about moral leadership. But where it really counts is how can you operationalize it? Can you actually take your values, have a conversation with your boss, so to speak, where you're not agreeing on those ethical decisions that's being made, and how can you infuse your thinking into that organization? So again, I really encourage you to go out and look at that site. It's quite powerful. Okay. So wise leadership. Do we want wise leaders? Yes, but how do we define those? We define them by saying what? They're respectful, they're principle focused, but we're all talking about conversation about topics that matter. Case studies really foster conversation, and that's really the point of the Global Jesuit Case Series, is to think about conversations around the fire. If you think about hundreds of years ago, we had conversations, we told stories. Think about before the printing press, before we had the printed documents. We told stories, and those stories mattered. So the impact of cases in the general sense now is to have what? A decision at the end. We have data, we analyze the data, the protagonist in that case basically has a situation that they need to address, and they make a decision. But what's not talked about, as much as it should be, and what we hope we will foster with this case series, is what's the impact of that decision that they're making, again, on the community, all right? So it's about an individual and communal discernment flowing from a conversation reflection, right? Reflection is absolutely very important here, okay? Our cases are related, and the teaching notes are very important, submitted to the case series are encouraged to be consistent with Catholic social teaching. Right? And again, you're all very familiar with these, I'm sure, but the respect for human dignity, the pursuit of the common good, solidarity with the poor and the vulnerable, and the view that the role of the economy is to serve the people and not the reverse. Those are key points. Those are things that should constantly be reminded and be reinforced when we're talking about cases and the impacts of those decisions. From a Jesuit perspective, right, the authors that would be creating these cases and submitting these cases, the educational goals must be consistent. They must be about self-awareness, the examine as we call it, innovation and life agility, living with one foot raised, always being able to pivot and move, thinking about what's the impact of my decision and which way should I be going. Care for the whole person, not just the whole person, but the people around you. How does your decision impact those people? Okay? Eclipsing mere competence, going beyond being confident but being thoughtful. And the key one is the last point, I think. It's about reflection in and on action. Being reflective before the decision, making that decision, and then being reflective about what's the impact, again, of that decision that I'm making. Reflection, action, reflection. If you talk about the Ignatian pedagogical paradigm, it's an emphasis on a conscious process, again, of context. My decision in what context? My experience, taking my experience and always making that a part of that decision, of reflecting, of acting, and again, and evaluating on that action. What are we trying to avoid? Thoughtlessness, and action without reflection, and reflection without action. In higher education, we call that analysis paralysis. We're reflecting a lot, but we're not making any action. Right? Is the world complex? Yes. Are the decisions that we have to make complex? Absolutely. So what do we need to consider? These are sort of paradigm shifts or thought, as Dr. Miles has pointed out in his previous talk. It's about framing questions, thinking about what the questions really need to be rather than just merely answering them. It's about the reality of uncertainty. Not everything is certain, but for students to reflect on the uncertainty. To be intuitive. You know, we talk about thinking out of the box, which is sort of an overused term for sure. The question is, should you ever be in the box to begin with? All right? So be intuitive, be creative, and then rational at all times. But systematic adaptability. We need to be adaptable, right? Because it's a very dynamic environment that we're in. Rather than, as Dr. Miles again said, very disciplinary specialization, very focused. We might have a tendency to be a little bit over-focused in our curriculum. So let's just talk just quickly. How am I doing on time? Pretty good? I'm all right? I'm short? All right. Formation. There's formation. Let me just go back quickly. Formation, cultivation, and collaboration are three main parts of our vision for the case series. Formation is talking about developing case writers and classroom facilitators that will believe in the guided conversation. Okay? Collaboration, based on our platform, all right, and again, gjcs.org if you'd like to go out there, is connecting faculty from around the world via the platform. We want these cases to foster conversation and help develop transformational leaders. The key, though, is going to be changing a whole generation of faculty to use cases in a different way, but providing them with different tools, but also having different cases coming from all of you. And let me talk about that just briefly here. Cultivation. Alumni become very, very important in this whole process. They become partners with us. What I would ask of you today is to think about your contribution to this transformation and think about all of the success stories that you have, all of the challenges that you've faced, and what powerful stories they would be for faculty to be able to use as well as students to be able to hear. Our platform has and will always have, hopefully, a way for you to tell us your story that can then be converted into a case. So if you have a story to tell that you don't even want to write the story up, we will connect you with a faculty member who will write that story, who will then transform that into a case study that would be used in class. That's a very powerful thing. That is the way that your good work, your message, will get to these students. And again, as Dr. Miles said, a lot of faculty haven't worked in business. They haven't experienced what you've experienced, and we need to hear those stories. So I encourage you to do that. I leave you with this. This is sort of our PR piece.
Caught up in the turbulence of daily events, leaders often lack the time and the tools needed to reflect deeply on their challenges and choices, to understand how their choices relate to a life lived well and fully.
More than ever, we need leaders who place people and planet on equal footing with profits.
Leaders who seek purpose above prestige, integrity above power. Leaders who are prepared to go forth and set the world on fire.
In collaboration with Jesuit colleges and universities around the world, we have created an international platform that leverages the collective intellectual strength of the Jesuit network.
We are developing emerging leaders by providing transformational learning experiences using unique cases rooted in the Jesuit tradition and core values.
We are executives and shareholders.
We are employees.
We are alumni.
We are educators.
We are students.
A global Jesuit case series.
Global cases, Jesuit values.
I look forward to receiving some of your stories and transforming those into cases that will be very meaningful to us. Thank you. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Habisch.
Let me start by telling you a story from my own studies. When the Berlin Wall crawled in 1990, I was actually studying in Berlin at the Free University. And I remember well that one day there was a famous professor, German economist, passing by. And he was member of the board of the Ministry for Economics in Germany. And he came up with a forecast. And he said, you know what, young students? German unification will not cost the German taxpayer even 1 mark. Yeah? It will finance itself. And this guy, said this to a procedure which was then the most expensive procedure in human history. Yeah? So economists calculate that we transferred no less than 1 billion from the western to the eastern part of the country, and 1 trillion in English, yeah, trillion, 1 trillion from one part to the other. So this was really a bad forecast, but of course the reason for that forecast was that this professor has never seen a production site in Eastern Germany from inside. Yeah, so this was all calculation. Yeah, he was calculating the Keynesian multiplier effect, and so then everything was fine at the end of the day. So what we want to do in business is, of course, teach students theoretical knowledge. They should come with models. They should be able to calculate. They should have instrumental skills. But this cannot be the whole story. Rather, what we also have to teach is what we call, since Aristotle, practical wisdom. And Dr. Miles had already talked about that, or we have reflected on that already. Practical wisdom. And how can we teach, or can we teach at all, at the university, which is more or less a theoretical endeavor, can we teach practical wisdom? Yeah, this, I think, is a very important question. And if we can do it at all, we have to bring in practitioners. We have to invite our students to look at practice and to better understand what practitioners are actually doing. And I think this is a very important part, especially in Catholic business schools, which understand themselves traditionally not as a planet in itself, but which understand themselves as a part of society and want to serve society and want to help also humanizing society in multiple ways. And also, of course, want to find new ways of business which are not only, well, an endeavor in itself, but also supporting what society is all about. So what we decided within UNIAPAC, a global board meeting at Zurich last year, is to launch a global case study project. And this was still rather independent from what our friends from Le Moyne and the Jesuit case study series did. We only later came in contact with you and very happy to be able to cooperate. But the idea was precisely that we have to transform business education, especially after the financial crisis, in which business education became more part of the problem than part of the solution. And the brightest, the smartest guys in the room, at Enron, but also later at the investment banks, were the one to truck the whole management and to steer the global business to a point in which we faced nearly a meltdown. So what we try to do is to launch this project, and the purpose of the project is to, of course, to enrich the global management education in business schools of mainstream universities, but also, of course, in companies. So we don't want to only look for small, pious islands, but we really want to reach mainstream institutions all over the world with that case selection. And also, of course, companies themselves. The main focus should be on small and medium enterprises. Also, entrepreneurs who stay in their context and who try to live their values, to live up to their normative intuition and make it happen. According to our conviction, it's not so much reflecting on normative reasoning, but it's more to what does it mean in practice, how to translate in a concrete situation, how to enrich your business experience with these search processes. This could also be in Catholic hospitals, in public institutions, etc. UNIAPAC member associations then are invited to cooperate with Catholic universities of their countries, and we recently also, for example, in Montevideo, worked with the Catholic universities and worked with the Catholic University and the member association, which was just mentioned, in order to transform authentic experiences of Christian spiritual leadership into teaching materials. The UNIAPAC project cooperates with the platform then for distribution. Materials will be produced in English and can be translated in local languages afterwards. And of course, in order to ensure quality control, we also make sure that there is a review process, an internal refereeing process within the global academic board, and a double-blind reviewing process. So the project management is currently coordinated within my university and the UNIAPAC Europe, but we are about to form an international group of colleagues who will do that. And in order to stick to our promise and have some minutes of Q&A, I stop here at that point and open the podium, and hopefully there are some contributions from your side.
A new organization, so one can't expect them to be, let's say, criticizing anything. So although it's important to train them in critical capacity, one thing I lack in your presentation, Dr. Fialoa, is innovating capacity, or the capacity of, let's say, trying to improve things, because really that's the only way perhaps someone who is in a completely new organization can possibly contribute to something. And another question is, you didn't mention, but still I think it would be important to add external knowledge to the curriculum, like history. Because I think the lack of knowledge of history is an enormous problem in today's young professionals. And finally, what would you say about management techniques and training for non-profit organizations? Because this is also an enormous contribution management education can give to society. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for those questions. Let me deal with the liberal arts component first. If we use Lemoyne as an example, it is a liberal arts institution, so the foundation of our business curriculum is liberal arts. Over half of the curriculum of the 120 credit hours is liberal arts. So we certainly believe in what we call the core of that foundational information in humanities, psychology, sociology is all part of the curriculum. Now, as far as graduate education and the humanities, that part, they come to us in all different ways for the MBAs, in that situation. Your other question about the non-for-profit, I think everything that I talked about fits perfectly for that as well. I mean, they certainly will need a lens in the non-for-profit world because it has different vocabulary and some other things, but everything that we're speaking to as far as the moral-centered leader certainly fits in that realm as well. So I don't really see the differentiation. We certainly have different vocabulary and some other things, but as far as the core knowledge and beliefs, I think they're synonymous.
Let me tell you something about innovation. This is precisely what the case study is all about. Yeah? If we look in the history of Catholic social thought, it's always been a history of innovation. Yeah, so we came up with social innovations. I mean, big parts of our institutions in our countries are kind of brought forward by those scholars and practical engagement. And what an entrepreneur does the whole day is innovating, because otherwise he can't be competitive in the long run. And so therefore we are especially looking on how innovators and entrepreneurs transform their value search process into a process of coming up with new products. And how this is, of course, constantly challenged by the environment, by the competitive environment, and then copying, but can be brought forward again. And many of our cases, for example, are located in the area of sustainability. Yeah, and we see precisely that these kinds of values push for new products, for new services, for reinventing business models. Yeah, and this is precisely the context, and we see that we have a lot of, first of all, small and medium entrepreneurs, because they are the most innovative, as we know. Yeah, and those who really push. And then the big ones, big companies, many cases, take it or buy it or whatever. But we want to understand how these entrepreneurs bring their business agenda forward. Also, because, and you're right, Annette, because of course our students always identify themselves also. They are also looking for identification figures. And if we only confront them with big companies and their logic, or CEOs of international companies, I think we also steer them in a certain row. And then the reality is that more than 90% are small and medium companies, and their probability to work in these companies, types of companies, is much bigger. Yeah, so this is also another focus of this case series, to bring these things in and deviate a little bit from the overall trend in management education, which is focusing only on big companies.
Okay. My name is Stefan Werhan. I'm from UNIAPAC Europe and from Germany. My question is, generally speaking, the role of profit. We heard before that the traditional schools are teaching basically how to get more of it, of profit. Now we introduce to the students other ethical standards. Let's take example, climate change, for example. Now, how do you motivate someone who gets paid and who is in a system, who is like in a company with a top guy on top who is really ambitious and wants to have very high values on the stock exchange, etc. How do you motivate someone young, as you said, coming from the university, and who is working in this system as a little worker in such a, let's take Google, for example. You are a small member of the Google company, and then how do you motivate him to act accordingly to the ethical standards? And then my question is it necessary, or is it the only way to do this? Is it to internalize external costs? Somehow to make it calculable that it's better for a company to respect, for example, climate change, than not doing it. And then it comes to the Christian thought of do we use nature or do we preserve? So that's a lot of questions, but there's coming so much in my mind. Sorry.
Yeah, I would like to add up on that. I'm not so sure as to whether the target group is correctly defined. When we are talking about Christian management education to students, what Herr Sugrandius has just said, I have been 38 years in Commerzbank, from bottom to board member. Young people, when they enter a company, they are totally powerless. They want to make a career, so they are not taking difficult decisions. They try to hide behind experts and behind voter and other opinions, because they want to make a career and they have a little family and build a house or whatever. So should we address as a target group the executives rather than the students? Because the students will not make an influence in a big DAX company or FTSE 100 company. Mm-hmm. They cannot, as long as they want to preserve their own, you know what I mean, yes.
Mm-hmm. Two things quickly. The first is, Stolefas, that you are once again referred to big companies, and told you your own story inside of the big company. Once again, we want to show that there is a world outside of the big companies, and there are small and medium ones. There are people who can work their way up, for example, in a small company, or found themselves one, who could become an entrepreneur. And we see that entrepreneurs, of course, have the ability, of course they have to be inventive, they have to make money at the end of the day. And we don't want to be misunderstood, Stefan, on that. Yeah? We don't want to speak bad about competitiveness. I think no entrepreneurial association can do that. It's the rule of our competitive economy, and that makes good sense, especially for the large number of customers. Yeah, but of course it's a question of the rules and the framework for that competition. But it also the question of people being innovative and inventive and bringing their way up. And by the way, even what the large companies is concerned, I recently took over a PhD student from a large Ingolstadt-based automotive company. Yeah, I don't mention here the name, but everybody knows it. And then we met with the deputy, the department chief, Bereichsleiter of this company, and he said, "Oh, I personally are very much fond in terms for sustainability. Unfortunately, the board is not interested." Yeah. This neatly described the situation of that company a year ago. Let's see what happened after the Volkswagen scandal. Yeah, and even in the banking sector, we have seen that some notorious people, in a way, also lost ground. Yeah, so even large companies, I think, with time goes by, they once in a while experience a shift. And what we do here is, of course, instilling a certain spirit in young people. They can work their way up, but they can also store these things, because when there is a crisis, then give them a chance to come up with alternatives.
Very, very interesting points that you raised. Certainly, focusing on current executives would be part of the mission of any kind of case study series. You would have executive education. But the point I guess I would make is, if you think about the next generation of leaders, shouldn't we be focusing on them as well? The millennials that are out there right now really believe that they can make an impact on the world. And by 2020, 50% of the workforce will be millennials. So part of our focus really needs to be on the next generation. So that's, I mean, again, we have a responsibility to all of the groups. And the materials that we have, the cases that we would use, the curricula that we would develop would be focused on all of those groups. But you bring up an excellent point. Guess we're good. No more questions? Yes.
Thank you. Hello to everybody. My name is Jose Homero Garza from Mexico, from the Universidad San Pablo from Mexico, too. My honor to stay with you. Speaking with the doctor in the morning, I asked him about if you have some news about costs to get together with more universities working on the platform of cases. I would like to ask you if you have some information, or is it still too early for that? Thank you.
Okay. Let me just make sure I understand the question about partnerships. Yes. Well, we don't have the cost down yet. I mean, again, the platform certainly needs to be sustainable, and we're working on different cost models for cases. But again, I want to emphasize that our vision for this platform is not just cases. It's for actually teaching and learning tools beside cases. So there would be cases, there would be stories, there would be videos. You've all heard of TED Talks. We're creating things that we're calling J Talks, which would be similar but more focused on cases, and also the ability to have what we would call videotaped live cases. So entrepreneurs like yourself being videotaped telling your story as well. And the platform, lends itself to that. So we are always looking for cases, and we're always looking for partners. The platform is very dynamic. So if you'd like to partner, if you'd like to have your enterprise that fits in with our mission and our vision as part of that, we would always be looking for having you visually on there. I am going to give myself a plug for the platform as well. You'll also, when you go on there, also see that we do have a publication where your stories and your case studies would actually be put in print. Now, this is the print version, which would come out twice a year, but it would be basically an e-version of this. So again, ways to disseminate your cases and your stories is available to you. But again, we're a global platform with global partners, so really the electronic version really is really the way to go to really get the word out there in a more efficient manner.